Picture this. You've spent weeks prepping for a crucial conversation. I'm talking spreadsheets printed, counterarguments anticipated, the whole pitch rehearsed in the mirror until it is absolutely flawless. You walk into the room, sit down across from your counterpart, and lay out an airtight, completely logical case. You are holding a winning hand here. But instead of getting a nod of agreement, you just hit a brick wall. The logic completely fails.
You look them in the eye and say, I have flawless data, undeniable logic, and I deserve this raise. And they just stare right back and simply say, no. That's it. The conversation stalls out, the tension in the room spikes, and you're sitting there completely bewildered, wondering how an argument so perfectly constructed could just shatter on impact.
So it really forces us to ask a pretty profound question. Why do some people consistently succeed in these high-stakes, difficult conversations, while others keep losing out on opportunities, even when they have vastly superior arguments? Well, the answer comes down to a fundamental, and honestly, often fatal flaw in how we approach human interaction. See, we walk into the room assuming the person sitting across from us is a rational actor, making decisions like a computer processing data.
But here's the reality check. It's completely different. As the extensive research from psychologist Daniel Kahneman and economist Amos Tversky proved, humans do not act in a strictly rational way. Actually, we're predisposed to over 150 cognitive biases. We're driven by primitive instincts, underlying fears, and these unspoken emotional needs. When you try to negotiate using only facts and rational logic, your words just bounce right off an invisible emotional wall. To truly influence someone, you've got to stop speaking to their logic and start accessing their deeply held emotional programming. And hey, this is true whether you're negotiating a $1 million corporate merger, buying a used car, or honestly, just trying to get your toddler to go to bed.
This brings us to a really fascinating concept pioneered by the former lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI, Chris Voss. It's called tactical empathy. Now listen, this isn't about holding hands or singing Kumbaya around a campfire. Tactical empathy is the calibrated application of emotional intelligence to understand and ultimately influence the feelings and mindset of another person. It's basically treating listening like a martial art. You're balancing subtle emotional intelligence with assertive influence to essentially gain access to the mind of the person across the table.
And it's absolutely crucial to get this distinction right, because empathy is very, very different from sympathy. Sympathy is putting yourself in their shoes and feeling sorry for them. Tactical empathy, it doesn't require you to agree with the other person's values at all, and it certainly doesn't mean you have to be nice. It is simply the strategic ability to recognize their perspective, to really see their worldview, and to vocalize that recognition. You are basically mapping out their reality so that you can effectively navigate it.
To pull this off, you have to fundamentally change how you listen. We usually think of listening as quiet, right? But listening is not a passive activity. It's actually the most active thing you can do. The truth is, most of us don't really listen. We just wait for our turn to speak, constantly formulating our rebuttal in our heads. Tactical empathy requires you to totally stop that impulse. The next time you feel triggered in a conversation, drop your arguments completely. Treat the whole thing like a high-stakes discovery mission, where your only goal is to unearth what is actually driving their behavior.
So, how do we do that? Well, one of the most effective, almost Jedi-like tools to extract this hidden information is a biological hack called mirroring. In human behavior, this is known as isopraxism. Basically, we fear what is different, and we're naturally drawn to what is similar. By subtly copying someone, you establish instant rapport and subconscious trust. And here is the exact formula to do it. First, you use a calm, downward-inflecting, late-night FM DJ voice. This immediately signals safety and control. Second, you simply repeat the last 1 to 3 critical words of what they just said. And third, you deploy at least 4 seconds of absolute silence, letting the mirror do its magic.
Let's look at a really realistic business scenario. Say a client stubbornly tells you, we just don't have the budget for this project. Instead of jumping in and arguing your value, you pause, you drop into that calm DJ voice, and you just say, you don't have the budget? And then you stay completely silent. People naturally hate awkward silence, right? But the mirror makes them feel understood. So they will almost inevitably feel that silence by elaborating, revealing vital information about their constraints or their true objections completely without feeling like they're being interrogated.
Okay, so once you start uncovering these hidden dynamics, you're going to need to manage the emotions attached to them. And this is where a neurological hack called labeling comes in. Labeling is validating someone's emotion by simply acknowledging it out loud. You use very specific sentence starters like, it seems like, it sounds like, or it looks like. Now, notice the complete absence of the word I there. If you say, I hear that you're angry, well, you just made it about you. But saying, it seems like you're frustrated keeps it about them, which keeps their defenses down.
You might be wondering, why is this so incredibly powerful? Well, it's because when you label a negative emotion, you literally disrupt its raw intensity in the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain. Take a pretty extreme example from a 1998 FBI case. You had 4 armed fugitives barricaded in an apartment. Instead of grabbing a megaphone and demanding they come out, the negotiator simply labeled their underlying fear. He said, "It looks like you don't want to go back to jail. It seems like you're scared." By consistently labeling those unspoken fears, he physically calmed their emotional brains. After a few hours, they surrendered peacefully. See, unexpressed negative emotions fester like an infection. Labeling them exposes them to daylight.
Now, once that safety is established, you actually have to abandon your primary instinct. Think about it. We are all conditioned to push for a yes. We want the agreement. But pushing for a yes actually makes people incredibly defensive. They feel cornered or trapped. Conversely, the word no provides a psychological safety net. No is not the end of the negotiation. It's actually the start of it. Letting someone say no gives them this illusion of control. It relaxes them, which makes them far more open to a real, collaborative discussion.
And this illusion of control, it is your greatest weapon when a conversation suddenly turns hostile. Imagine a counterpart gets really aggressive and yells, "You're screwing me out of money and it has to stop." Your natural instinct is probably to fight back and defend yourself. Instead, what if you deflect the punch by asking calmly, "How am I supposed to do that?" Boom. You've just transformed a direct, angry attack into a collaborative problem-solving exercise while still, essentially, saying no to their demand.
This specific technique is known as using calibrated questions. These are open-ended questions carefully designed to keep the conversation flowing while putting the mental burden squarely on the other person. You always want to begin them with how or what, and you almost never use why, because why feels like an accusation. It instantly triggers defensiveness in pretty much any language across any culture. Asking how am I supposed to do that forces the other person to stop attacking and actually use their own mental energy to solve your problem.
But hey, words alone aren't going to cut it. As you guide the conversation with these calibrated questions, you have to pay intense attention to what is unsaid. You need to apply the 7-38-55 rule. In any communication, only 7% of a message is based on the actual words being spoken. Think about that. 38% comes from the tone of voice, and a massive 55% comes from body language and facial expressions. If a person's tone and body language do not perfectly align with the words coming out of their mouth, they are either unconvinced, holding something back, or just outright lying. And understanding what success actually sounds like in these moments is where most people fail. So many of us think hearing "you're right" means we've won the argument. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. When someone says you're right, they're usually just trying to get you to stop talking and go away. It's a polite dismissal. What you actually want to trigger by perfectly summarizing their worldview and labeling their emotions is the phrase, "that's right." When someone says "that's right," it indicates true psychological alignment. It literally means a mental and behavioral breakthrough has just occurred.
All of these techniques we've covered, they're building toward the ultimate goal of any complex interaction, finding the black swan. In any high-stakes conversation, there are known knowns, the things both sides are well aware of. But there are always unknown unknowns. A black swan is a hidden piece of information. It could be an unexpressed vulnerability, a secret constraint, or a completely hidden motivation. Neither side initially recognizes it, but once it's unearthed, it completely changes the entire game.
You uncover these black swans by embracing what's called a beginner's mind. You just cannot be blinded by your own assumptions. You have to look for the unspoken pressures. Like maybe your counterpart isn't actually worried about the price at all. Maybe they're just terrified of looking incompetent in front of their boss. You find these variables by listening longer than feels natural, by utilizing that tactical empathy, and by paying intense attention to incongruencies in their behavior. Find the black swan, and you unlock the entire deal.
Every single day, your career, your finances, and your relationships hinge on your ability to navigate conflict. From day one, we're taught to be clever, to argue the facts, and to just compromise or split the difference. But true influence isn't about winning a logical argument. It is about deeply understanding the human being sitting across the table.
So in your very next difficult conversation, are you going to rely on flawless logic to try and batter down their walls, or will you listen closely enough to find their hidden black swan?